Welcome back for part 2 of our 3-part series on how to draw gems and jewels. Today we're going to talk about coloring in your gems and jewels. We're going to look at 3 different ways to color them in. First, we're going to use regular pencil to talk about the basics. Second, we're going to use our colored pencils. And third, we're going to use our washable markers to do some marker painting. Before we get started, we should talk about 2 important vocabulary words. The first is value. The value of a color in art is how light or dark it is. A lot of times we talk about them with value scales, which are just ways of showing all of the possibilities from the lightest value on one end to the darkest value on the other end. In a value scale, you put each one of the values in a box. So a super light version of the color, then a little bit darker, then a little bit darker than that, and a little bit darker, until you get to the darkest possible version of the color. We can also show all of the value possibilities in a gradient. So starting with light on one end and dark on the other end, or vice versa, and smoothly going from one value to the other. That is one type of gradient. However, we can also talk about gradients being that blend from one color to a different color on the other side. We're going to use both of those types of gradients in coloring in our gems today. In this part, we're going to go over 3 different ways that you can color in your gems. The first is a very simple pencil shading. So if all you have is a regular pencil, that is fine. If you have colored pencils, we're going to go over how to color in your gems with one colored pencil. And finally, we're going to use our washable markers to do a little marker painting of our gems. The beauty of gems and jewels really comes from how the light hits them. So to start, we need to think about where the light is coming from. Since the light is just in our imagination, for square gems like this, I always have the light coming down from the top. For ones with beveled corners, which we'll talk about later, you might want to move the sun a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. No matter where your sun is coming from, the side closest to your light is going to be the lightest. The farthest away will be the darkest, and any other spaces will be kind of in between. Generally with pencil, if you're pressing lightly, you're going to get a light color. And if you press really hard, you're going to get a dark color. But you can also build up color by going over a space more than once, especially if you change the direction of your pencil strokes. Building up color will be the easiest way for you to make a gradient in the middle of your gem, starting light on the side farthest away from your light, and gradually getting darker as you go towards the light. So to make that easier for myself, I colored the entire space very lightly in pencil. And then as I went over it again, I skipped a little bit of the bottom. The next time, I left a little bit more at the bottom, going up to the top until I was making a very dark pencil color at the very top of the face. Coloring your gems with colored pencils is more or less the same, so let's look at a beveled edge to see how you have to adjust for other styles. Just like before, we're going to start with the lightest value of our color, but this time let's color in every space that super light value just to get us started. Depending on where my sun is coming from, I'm going to leave one spot light. The next one on either side are going to be just a little bit darker than that lightest one. And as we move farther away from the light, it's going to get a little bit darker each time. The very darkest space should be the one directly opposite from the lightest spot. Remember to work slowly and gradually build up that color. But if you get a little carried away, you can always use an eraser to lighten things up a little bit back to where you want it to be. For the middle, just like before, we're going to cover the whole thing in a light value and then slowly darken, going a little bit higher each time until it's really dark at the top and still very light at the bottom. I like to erase two little lines to be like a shine on it, but that's very optional. Just always make sure to go back and check to make sure that each section of your gem is a slightly different value than the one before it. You can also color gems with two colors instead of one. Just pick either a light and a dark of the same color or two colors that are pretty close to each other on the color wheel, like pink and purple, or green and blue, or orange and red. Here I started by coloring in half of my gem with the yellow. I started light so that I can build up the color. Then on the other half, I'm going to color it in green. I'm trying to end up with one space that is completely yellow, or very, very yellow with a tiny bit of green, one space that is a very dark green, and the rest are different combinations of green and yellow, from a lot of yellow with a little bit of green towards the light side, to a lot of green with a tiny bit of yellow on the darker side. When it comes to the middle, I'm going to do a gradient again, but instead of doing a dark to light gradient, I'm going to do a blend from yellow to green, from green to yellow. To make sure that I have a nice smooth gradient, I'm going to make sure to start super light and slowly build up the color. Switching back and forth between the two colors will also help it to blend, because as the yellow colors over the green and as the green colors over the yellow, they start to mix together a little bit more in the center. I can't wait to see what color combinations you choose when trying this two-toned gem technique. Now let's take a look at how we can use markers to paint our gems. Most of the time, I prefer to use Sharpie to do all of my tracing. But when it comes to marker painting gems, I think that the white crayon really adds a special touch to the jewels. Just make sure that you lighten your pencil marks with an eraser before you trace to make sure that the pencil marks don't show through the crayon. After tracing, we're going to outline both the outer rectangular square and the inner rectangular square with a nice thick line. Now we're going to use our paintbrush and our nice clean water to scrub around that outside outline. We're going to pick up the color into the water and then blend it down towards the face. Ideally trying to get each section to be a little bit darker towards the outside and a little bit lighter towards the inside. You can dab with a paper towel or a napkin, or just rub a little bit with your finger to help you get that blend. Last but not least, we're going to do the same thing on the inside. First scrubbing around the outline to pick up the color, and then blending it towards the middle. Again, we want it to be a little bit darker around the edge of the face and a little bit lighter in the center. In the end, the white crayon lines end up looking like extra shine, and that blend in the middle makes your gem seem to glow from the inside out. In part 3, I'm going to go over how to make these really cool round jewels that are also really fun to marker paint.